Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening. Welcome to EIG's 34th webinar, De-risking Execution Priorities, Reduce Risk to Increase Market Differentiation. Thank you for joining us today, and we appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedules to attend Enhance National's first in a series of webinars on de-risking and to build, to build the evolving resilient enterprise. We hope that your family and are healthy and safe. Again, this is the first of the webinars. We're going to be doing another webinar next month on new product introduction de-risking. And then in September, we're going to go out and do a webinar on another topic, maybe consolidation or some capital type of project. Again, this webinar is meant to be interactive with polling questions and active chat. So please do enter in the chat. There is the poll EV anywhere question right here, pollev.com. It's in your chat. Please do log into that. I can see that we're split down the middle here, or down in quarters, I guess. That's very interesting on this question. Continue to answer this question. We'll definitely share this stat when we send out the notes after the meeting. Again, EIG has a series of webinars and we focus on people, process, data, and technology. And this webinar kind of combines process and then using a SaaS type of solution to help us in the process of de-risking. Our upcoming webinars we'll have next week is one on artificial intelligence, the week after on supply chain risk and resiliency. And we also have some upcoming webinars on new product introduction. And we will be having a fireside chat next month on a very interesting topic of lean versus supply chain risk and resilience. That'll be a fun discussion. Today, we are fortunate to have with us the president and founder of the AIM Institute, who over 10 years ago started the blueprinting process, or 20 years ago started the blueprinting process. And Dan has won numerous awards and he is a dynamic, interesting speaker. So with that, Dan.
Yeah, and maybe we should let them decide if I am actually very interesting as a speaker, but it's a great pleasure to be here, Jim. Thanks for letting me join you. I'll let you go through the rest of the introductory slides, and then you and I will do a little tag team on this topic. So I look forward to that.
Thanks, Dan. So this webinar, again, is the first of three. There may be more, but these are the ones that Dan and I put together. I just mentioned them a few minutes ago. So look for July 22nd. And September 22nd. So we're into the 22s, I guess. Today, we'll talk about why do we need this? What is the need first? A little bit on that. We'll welcome any comments in the chat. And then we'll get into the software that Dan has developed over these last few years on uncovering the risk versus uncertainty, the approach and the philosophy behind this. And then there's a case story of boxes, because everybody deals with boxes today. We love to ship boxes. So it's a great case study. And then I will come back on the 4 steps of de-risking. And then Dan will close it out with a new management conversation. So with that, I just wanted to kind of introduce a little bit about, just kind of get your juices going on what's happening in the world today. We have this lack of supply and this changing demand as we sync back up into after COVID. And there's a lot of folks who says, you know, whoever's able to leverage digitization or digital transformation the best will be able to create their unfair market share. And of course, there's lots of disruptions, of course, the pandemic, but there's also quite a number of other disruptions happening in the marketplace, everything from cybersecurity, which we are hearing more and more on the news, and it's getting more prevalent, to counterfeiting and failures. So anyone who can de-risk and understand this marketplace better is going to have that competitive advantage. as we like to say, your unfair market share. So this is one of the tools and approaches to help you. The Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium focused on this. Our new product introduction series also focused on this. So with that, if there's any comments in the chat, if there's not, I will move this over to Dan, and Dan will bring us through uncovering your risks.
Great. Well, thank you, Tim. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we'll see if we can make the transfer without any of us getting hurt here. But so let's take a look at the agenda here. As Jim mentioned, we're going to talk about these landmines that can blow up projects, discuss risk versus uncertainty because they're very different. I'll start us off on a case study, and then Jim will take us on to the 4 steps of de-risking, and we'll talk about how we can communicate differently with management. Now, please pardon me, I'm going to be flying fairly low through this material, going pretty quickly. So if you have some questions, just drop them in chat and we'll slow down and cover them in more detail. But also, Jim's going to be sending out a PDF of all this, correct, Jim? So they can look the notes over. So, you know, chat, we can talk, we'll have time for that, and then you'll have more complete notes. So do let us know if I go through something a little bit too quickly. But let's go ahead and talk about this first topic, landmines. And, you know, Astro Teller was the head of Google X. I don't know where you get a name like that, but I love it. He used to say, we spend most of our time trying to prove we're wrong on these big projects we do. We run at the hardest parts of the problem first and cheer, hey, how are we going to kill our project today? Well, I spent 29 years working in the chemical industry, and I can tell you, we had these great hope projects, and we didn't do this. We were always afraid that if our project get killed, we'd get fired. You know, it's a different way of thinking. I like the way he thinks, and that's the direction we're going to move in here with this de-risking approach. Now, if we're going into familiar markets and technologies, you know, there's still a good risk that it's not going to go well, but it really tends to get scary, especially when you're going into unfamiliar markets. Also unfamiliar technologies, but especially unfamiliar markets. And so what we want to do is talk about ways of de-risking that. Now, the examples we're going to give you today are about market-facing innovation, developing a new product or service. But as Jim mentioned, this can be applied to anything. It can be applied to anything where there's uncertainty, consolidating a couple of plants, doing a merger and acquisition, pressure testing your strategy. So today we'll focus on market-facing innovation, but then Jim's lined up a couple of other webinars in the next couple months where we'll look at different examples of how to apply this. But for now, let's think about when you do have a market-facing new product introduction, what's happening? The chances are you've got some projects that didn't go so very well. And maybe there was a landmine that blew up the budget or the schedule or people's reputations. The question I have is, would your team, if asked, would they identify what it was that blew up that? And would it have been better if they could have spotted it earlier? When I work with teams that they go back into their history, they usually say, oh yeah, we know what killed that one. And they all agree. But they usually say we could have learned that earlier if we would have either been paying more attention and not been afraid to deliver bad news, or if we would have gotten all the assumptions laid out at the beginning and then pursued those. So let's talk about landmines. I mean, nobody steps on a landmine they can see, right? Also, if we're in unfamiliar terrain, a lot of uncertainty, they're more dangerous. And we don't even want to think about these. These are not happy thoughts. Now, the sooner we spot a landmine, the more options we have to get around it. So we want to spot these as early as possible. The other thing that I've observed is risky projects become late projects. Here's what I mean. Our team is moving along. All of a sudden, whoa, here's a landmine. This could kill our project. Everybody comes to a screeching halt. Maybe we figure out a way of getting around the landmine. Just when we get our speed back up, whoop, there's another landmine. Stop, everybody. What we want to do is get all those landmines identified right at the get-go so we can deal with it. That's what we'll be talking about today. Now, before we do that, I want to just take you on a little side trip. Is uncertainty different than risk? So let's think about this together. And I apologize, I'm going to give you like 4 minutes. It probably took me 4 days to process this. But think about it this way. Let's say I work for Jim, and Jim says, Dan, I want you to go out to southern Utah, and I want you to cross this unfamiliar chasm. Is it risky to do so? Well, if you look up the definition of the word risk, it's you have to know enough to assign a probability of a negative event. Now, we just said this was an unfamiliar chasm, so I don't know if it's risky. All I can say is I am uncertain. Now, a lot of companies start assigning risk too early. They give probabilities of success and net present values, and it creates all this unnecessary stress for them. Sometimes they overcommit. Somebody goes, you bet, Jim, I'm going to cross that chasm no matter what. And there was no bridge there, okay? Or sometimes they go, oh man, let's not go after that market. I'm sure it's scary. And there was a bridge there the whole time. So what we want to do is not assign risk early, but instead just say, I don't know. Let's eliminate the uncertainty cheaply and early. Hey, Jim, can I have an airfare ticket? I'll fly out to Salt Lake City. I'll drive and I'll check this out. It's not a big deal. It's called options theory. Pay a little to learn a lot. That's what we're going to do with this approach. Now, you can think of uncertainty in different levels. You may have facts. We know what we know. You may have some assumptions. We know what we think. You may even have some questions. We know what we don't know. Now, these are things we are aware of at the onset of the project. You can also have some surprises, right? We don't know what we don't know. So here's our job. We need to figure out, we need to understand these things that we don't fully understand today, and we need to discover the surprises. Think of it as a continuum, a spectrum, from all the way from high certainty to high uncertainty. Now, if our team is going into an unfamiliar market we've never been in before, the amount that's actually facts tends to be quite low. If we're going into a familiar market, yeah, we got more facts. What we want to do is deal primarily with facts. Now, when I say this, we don't want to be dealing with factoids. I love that definition. Unreliable information repeated so often it becomes accepted as fact. Have you ever run into this on your projects? We want to really know what's the source of truth. You know, what is fact and what is myth? So that's what we're going to be going for, a high percentage of facts. But Jim, I think we've got a little polling question here. Jim's going to set this up for us. How does your management view risk in your company, in your division? Are they a pragmatist, kind of risk averse? Are they conservator? Are they a manager? Are they a maximizer? Or are you just not sure? Jim, I'll let you go ahead and share that. Maybe explain to folks again how they take this survey if they're not sure.
So yeah, please go to pollev.com/Jim deVries 073. It looks like we have a couple people entering in and getting the hang of it. Fantastic. Thank you for your feedback. We have diversity of folks here. It looks like we have some pragmatists, a conservator, and the manager, and no maximizers yet. Those are the maybe people that are companies that kind of really go for it all the time.
Yep.
And take risk. And generally, you know, we associate some of this with the impact of loss of life. So if you're making a product where somebody could, you know, get hurt, or, you know, or there could be significant damage, you tend to be more towards the pragmatist and conservator, and at best a manager. But to be a maximizer and have a loss of life, but of course going to the moon or going into space is a maximizer type of thing. But
industry specific, isn't it, Tim?
Yeah. So there's no right or wrong here, but it's interesting that we see that about half the folks are managers. The companies are managers. So it's more your organization. But thank you so much for your feedback. So back to you.
All righty. I'll take it back here, share my screen again, and let's move into this case story now. So imagine we all work for Acme Composites. So congratulations to those of you who are new hires. And you may know that our company made its claim to fame by taking recycled plastic and wood fibers and combining them and making decking. Now, one of us came into work one day and maybe had too much caffeine and said, you know what? I bet we could take a little bit of recycled plastic and a lot of recycled wood fibers and make some really cool packaging composites. And we just think of the cool things that we could do. Now, we're not sure this is a great idea yet, but it's a market-facing innovation we want to explore. And someone says, let's use this Minesweeper de-risking methodology we've heard about. So let's see what that would look like. First we have to pick a specific market segment to go after. And we're not going to go after canned peas or frozen food, but we're going to go after the folks who are using packaging for e-commerce, Amazon, LL Bean, Zappos, and so forth. So we get our target market segment, and then away we go. And so we know we're going to want to interview companies all down the value chain. So we're going to want to interview people who make box blanks, because we're going to sell our composite to these people. And we're going to want to interview their customers like Amazon, Zappos, and then the people who handle the boxes like FedEx. And we better make sure people can open the box and get rid of it. I mean, there's uncertainty all the way down the value chain, and we need to explore that. So here's what we're going to do. And this we have found to be true for every market-facing de-risking project. And that is this, that there are 6 areas of uncertainty to manage. Now, some of these are external assumptions, like market dynamics. Is the market big enough? Are the regulations going to block us? Are the industry standards going to be acceptable? What about competitive dynamics? And then, what are the customers in this market getting today that they need to keep getting? And what are the outcomes or desired end results that they would like to get that they're not getting enough of today? Now, why do we call these external? Well, if a shadow competitor of ours is doing the same exercise, trying to break into the same market, at least theoretically, they would come up with the same list of assumptions that we have, because it's not about us or that competitor, it's about the market. It's external, okay? Now, as you can imagine, there's some internal assumptions. What are our capabilities? Can we scale up? Can we even do this in the lab? Do we have a sales force to reach the market? Are we able to reach solutions for all of their required outcomes? And can we satisfy at least one of their desired outcomes? If all we do is hit the required, we're entering a red ocean. And the incumbent will fight tooth and nail and be price battles and so forth. So we got to hit everything they're getting today and at least one important unsatisfied outcome. So we got 6 buckets we need to be thinking about that we're going to put our assumptions in. And what we're going to do is look at the high impact, low certainty ones. So we're going to just deal with market dynamics. Remember, that was the one over on the left there, upper left, market dynamics. So imagine a list like this. We get together, we brainstorm, and somebody says, ooh, the total addressable market better be at least 100 million. Somebody says MD2, well, external regulations and standards won't block us. Look at MD6. Some clever person said, we better be able to convince the whole supply chain to change at the same time. In other words, it doesn't do us any good if FedEx likes it, but Amazon or the box blank makers can't use it. So that's a really good one. Now, after we generate all these assumptions, and Jim will take you through these steps in a few minutes, the next thing we want to do is find out which of these are high impact and low certainty. So we rate these all for impact and certainty. Let's just take MD6. What's the impact, team? This is with our multifunctional team. What's the impact if it's not true, if we can't get the whole value chain to change at the same time? And somebody goes, well, Dan, we're toast. This is a really high impact assumption. So we put it way over on the right. And then we say to our team, well, how certain are we that we can get the whole value chain to change at the same time? And somebody says, Dan, we don't have a clue. We haven't gotten started. We need to interview people, do market research and so forth. So really low certainty. You see where that lands? It lands in the red danger zone, high impact, low certainty. That could be a landmine. Then if over time we start investigating this, we might get it up into the yellow. We're getting a little more certain. We've interviewed people, we learn more. Eventually, we want to get up into the green zone. Now, if it's not very high impact, it doesn't really matter a lot, we don't have to be as confident. That's why you see the green cells descending down and to the left. Does this make sense? We got the red danger zone, then we got the yellow caution zone, and then we have the green safe zone. And what we want to do is get our assumptions in the green safe zone. Now, we'll do this for all 6 areas here. And so we'll be able to report out to management for these 6 buckets. How many assumptions are safe? How many are caution? How many are in the danger zone? And we'll build what we call a checkpoint plan. It's kind of like an action plan where different members of our team say, I'll take that one, I'll go check it out, I'll do interviews. I'll take that one, I'll go in the lab and run some tests. I'll try to scale up and so forth. So that's what we'll be doing, is driving from uncertainty to certainty on the assumptions that are fairly impactful. Now, if we're successful, we'll be driving down the number of red and yellow assumptions, the caution and danger over time. And we'll be showing management how we're making progress. So that's the process at a high level that we're going to be pursuing. Jim, I think we got another one here. I'll read this while you get this ready. But how proficient is your company in identifying, assessing, mitigating, and managing risks? And there you see the responses. Go ahead, Jim, if you want to share your screen on that. Is that how that works?
Yeah, I'm going to try to share my screen now.
All right.
I think it's coming through.
Yeah.
It's hard to control the clicks. All right. So somewhat proactive. We got some somewhat reactive. That's great. Again, there's no right or wrong. This is where you're at today. Look forward to getting people's, and if you have comments to add on to this, is, you know, how you're feeling about this within your company as far as identifying risk, preferably uncertainties, as Dan explained. Are you being proactive? Are you being proactive? Maybe some things that you can do. So it seems like everybody's kind of walking the tightrope on this question, Dan.
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly. Well, it's a tricky one, isn't it?
It is. But, you know, nobody's watching, so just stuff. So you can come and share. But if folks have questions or comments, please do enter them in the chat. And with that, I thank you for participating in this survey question. And we're going to cover these 4 basic steps that Dan has developed. You know, how to de-risk transformational projects so as to transform your company in a good way. And as Dan may say, you know, not a career bad way, right, Dan?
That's exactly right.
Yeah. So, you know, with all these risking type of activities, it could be a career endeavor for better or worse. So, and I guess Dan has a fact here that, you know that you're not taking advantage of not planning is, right? So do you know what that advantage is not planning? Well, you don't have to worry, right, Dan?
Exactly right. Yeah. If you don't plan, somebody explained to me the advantage is the failure takes you as a complete surprise, and it's not preceded by a long period of worry and anxiety. Not sure I subscribe to that, but there's a theory.
Yeah, there's your theory. So I guess if you don't buy into this, you can sleep well at night. All right, so we'll get on with it then. You know, the Minesweeper has this 4-step process, as Dan outlined. Generally is used for larger projects. And, you know, he talks about new product introduction, but of course, this way of identifying uncertainties and assumptions is a great way to manage any project. So first, the team generates like Post-it notes, as you see here is a bunch of Post-it notes. of things that must be true from a positive perspective, right? And to ensure project success. So this is usually done, in a workshop environment. Maybe it's people entering in the system independently in the workshop and then coming together to look at those. So we'll look at first market dynamics, and you can make that equivalent to like an outside in view. You can look at internal capabilities, such as a total addressable market, and those internal is more of an inside out view. And then you can look at the customer requirements, such as, provide necessary customer support. And for a project, it could be the stakeholders who own the project, what they require. So just trying to align it to different approaches. And then there's other tools that you can use, like walking the process. Like in Six Sigma, we also often say the Gamma walk. And here, Dan has laid out the consumption chain, and he broke it into 4 pieces: the pre-purchase, the procurement process, the operations, and post-operations. And so as you walk through that process, you want to make sure that all those links or those core processes are identified, and any uncertainties are identified in that each one of those steps. And you want to make sure you just don't forget about one. This is just to make sure that everybody's on the same page of the total scope and scale. So I found that this often works very, very well. Then, as you go through the assumptions and you get to the impact. So as you can see, the impact is on a scale 1 to 5, starting with irrelevant to essential. So obviously we want to find the essential ones and the high impact ones. And then from a certainty perspective, the uncertainty, as Dan mentioned before, could be anything from unknown to certain. In this case, for this assumption, the government regulations don't block or significantly delay us. We'll say, well, that's probably something that could occur. Or it could be something like faithfully scale our product up to full production. Well, we know we're going to do that, but the risk there, perhaps. So each one of these has a uncertainty rating and how you feel about it and the team feels. So coming to team consensus, we'll get to in a moment here, but avoid groupthink. Allow people to voice what they believe is the most important thing, and have an active dialogue about it with the team. And sometimes everybody's on point and they agree. That's great. You can move on. But sometimes there's one person who could end up swaying because they have a different perspective, which also is very important, that the team that you assemble is a cross-functional team, and it's not all just from a single perspective. So as we go through the de-risking, as Dan already covered, the team identifies or reviews the histograms of the individual members' ratings, and then from the impact and certainty perspective, and then they decide, you start plotting where each of the uncertainties lie, each of those risk uncertainties and assumptions lie, and starting at the bottom, red is of course the ones that you're looking at the most. And as time goes on, you might have some that are marching up. You can march it up by, as Dan mentioned earlier, understanding and de-risking that particular event, or that assumption, I should say. So as Dan said, across the top here are those 6 areas where you could have different sources for assumptions, external assumptions and internal assumptions, and we'll plot those out and de-risk them. And so the one thing that we want to look at is the rules of engagement. So, this is pretty important and should never be overlooked, Dan, right? I mean, this is where you can get into trouble, is if you rush through this and you don't really go through the 3 phases of discussion. The first phase, of course, sharing the knowledge, and then get everybody's opinion out. But when people start repeating opinions, it's time to move on, right? That's enough is enough, right? Sometimes we had time, no war stories, or try to make it a short war story, so to speak. But sometimes stories do help. So to explain what the perspective is, and then how to move on. Use the most cautious voice of the team. This is the highest impact and lowest certainty. And this, of course, avoids those false screens, which are not investigated. So the most cautious impact ratings are those that are closest to the essential side at the bottom. So that's more cautious. And as uncertainty, we move down to the bottom of the unknowns, as Dan mentioned before. So these are the 5 levels of ratings. And then, as Dan mentioned, the derisking steps are here, and these are all identified actions that the team can take to derisk a assumption. And it's everything from training to investigation to focus groups, all the actions that you would take to remove that uncertainty for those particular assumptions. So those actions are taken, they're signed and tracked throughout the process. So we want to do that on that, investigating the assumptions. So it could be market research, as we see here, and customer interviews. That could be one area. Another could be the goal could be focused more on doing some more R&D testing for a new product, or it could be going back out to the customers and working with them and doing more interviews, or the team. So again, you're moving from uncertainty to certainty. And the nice thing is the reports are fantastic that the AIM Institute has put together. You have your orange and your red. The reds obviously are not good, right? So over tracking week by week is the time frame that you found works pretty well, Dan?
Yeah, it is. Sometimes the teams meet every 2 weeks, but get that team frequency and then keep plotting, keep updating it. And it's very impressive when you show to management how you're making progress. It doesn't look like a black box anymore.
Yeah, so I know a lot of folks might want to do it monthly, but the likelihood you'll be able to really make an impact significant impact for any project, I would say, on a monthly basis is probably, it's too late. Month is just too late. So I just want to impress on that. So you can track the number of oranges to reds, that ratio, and the total number of them. And you can see in week 2, they went up. Because why? Because as they dug deep into it, they actually identified some additional risks. So that's fairly common. And as you move in the right-hand quadrant there, you see you have the external and internal uncertainties plotted against each other. And you can see them. You're really moving from this far. This is where you start, and you're moving towards the middle over time. So really nice, slick software to identify the landmines and your uncertainties and track your actions all the way through the process. So with that, Dan, you can close it out.
Yeah, and we're getting pretty close to the end, if anybody was wondering. Thanks for sharing that, Jim. Just as I get this ready to go here, whoops, there we go, I'll catch up. I thought I was in the right spot, but I wasn't quite. As we started developing this new methodology about 5 years ago, but it was only about a year ago that we finally got the software all pulled together. And that has helped tremendously because you can get the report generated and it just saves you a lot of work. But I think the other thing that we've learned is we were concerned about the human behavioral aspects of it. And we weren't sure if maybe a boss or a team leader in a project would browbeat people and go, oh, don't be a wimp, we're confident of this, or oh, that's not such a big impact. But what we found was by having the individuals rate these first, and then have that histogram show up, and by following those rules of engagement that you just outlined, Jim, we've been very, very pleased. We've done this with dozens and dozens of teams over the last year. And what we've seen is people really respond well, and they're very fair and open-minded. And so we've been pleased with the way that teams implement this. Now, here's the surprise I had. I knew this would help teams do a better job of managing transformational, risky projects. But what I didn't realize, that's probably only half the benefit. The other half is it totally can change the conversation we have with management. So let me just close out on that. Oops, a couple points before we get there. So when management's making decisions, there's two types. One is the type one, the big all or nothing. I worked in a chemical company once, and literally our president showed up on the cover of Chemical Week. This is back in the 1980s, a big cigar out of his mouth. And it talked about the big bet that our company was making on a new PVC plant. And he was pushing all the chips out there, man. Those reactors ended up rusting in a field in Plaquemine, Louisiana. So it was not a good one. What we want to do is consider more type 2 bets, small sampling bets. Jeff Bezos has said there's a tendency to use these big type 1 decisions, but we got to be careful. They're going to slow us down because we're worried about them and we won't be as inventive. We need to be thinking about more type 1 decisions. Pay a little to learn a lot. So let's go on now to talk about how we interact with management. So one of the charts you're going to show them will be this one. If you're in the upper right, it just means you have a lot of uncertainties, external and internal. Doesn't mean it's bad or good, just means that's where you're at. And you need to convince management that you are in the learning phase here. You are not asking them for investment or decisions, you're just updating them. This is a learning path. Later, boss, I'm going to come to you and we need some money to scale up, to build a planned expansion, to do something else. But for now, we're just learning. We're driving from uncertainty to certainty. Don't ask me for a net present value. Don't ask me for a probability of success. We're going to learn quickly and cheaply. Now, this changes the dynamics of your reviews. When I was in industry, it seemed like team would come to the C-level suite and prepare they go over their PowerPoint presentation. And by the third slide, the only person who was following the molecular structure anymore was the chief technology officer. You know, the HR lady is doing her email and, you know, the marketing person is working on something else, you know. That's not good. You want everybody on the management team to be engaged. And you can do that by showing them how you're going after each of these assumptions. Now, the second thing I want to do is, if I'm the team leader, separate my success from the project. I need to say, listen, I don't know if this project should be going. Remember, we're in the learning phase. It may not deserve to continue, but here's my commitment to you, boss. As soon as we find out this project isn't any good, as soon as we hit a landmine, I'll let you know as soon as we know, and we'll kill the darn thing. And then also, here's when I'm updating you on our learning path. Here's when I'm asking you for a decision. Make it very clear. And then let's make sure they know we're following an intelligent plan. So I remember once I was responsible for the first factory we were going to build over in China. This was a long time ago. And so I had a review with the president. The president goes, Adams, what about this? And I took my Gantt chart, spun it around, slid it across the highly polished mahogany table and said, well, sir, we've got that handled on line number 42 of our Gantt chart. Okay, kept going on a little more. Adams, what about this? I said, push the Gantt chart. Well, we got that handled on line 134, sir. Nice job, Adams. Then he went on, he beat up some other team about how they were doing. And I remember thinking, oh, I get it. As long as he knows I'm following an intelligent plan, he's going to leave me alone. Now, what if we have not just a Gantt chart for timelines and resources and tasks? What if we had a Gantt chart for risk? That's what we want to do. We can show them, here are all the assumptions that could kill our project, but looky here, we're driving the red and yellow over to green, and we're making progress every couple of weeks. They will extend so much more of their confidence to you if you do that. Let them join your team, not judge it. Now, what happens when you do this? You're going to get less micromanaging, less second guessing, and you're going to get more management patience. So I think we got another polling question here, Jim. And then, in fact, I'll read it and then I'll turn it over to you because I think you're going to wrap it up then. How often does your company have risk-based discussions?
So do you have those semi-annually, quarterly? You do it monthly, weekly, or it's part of the way it's in the DNA of what you do at each and every day? What is the way modus of operandi of your company? It's interesting. We have two extremes here, Dan.
Exactly. Yep.
Now we got somebody to fill in the gap.
Now we're going to fill in the middle.
All right. Weekly. That's fantastic. Well, I'd love to hear from any of the folks that answered or did not answer. Please do enter in the chat what your thoughts are behind why your company looks at risk at whatever periodicity that they do. Is risk good, or uncertainty viewed as discovering uncertainty? Is that viewed as a positive in your organization, or is it viewed negatively and you're scared to raise your hand in your organization? Because culture, we all know, eats strategy for breakfast, but it also eats these type of issues. So weekly, one of our participants, the proactive discussions are not necessarily weekly, but are included in all our project reviews. Okay, it's good.
Encouraging.
Encouraging. So thank you for participating in that. And I think we have a closeout slide and one more polling question. So we hope you enjoyed today's webinar covering the need. Why do we care? We all understand that if we take on risk and we use it as a competitive capability over the marketplace, the companies that take that on will be the winners coming out at the end. And Dan covered the uncovering your risk, the landmines, the risk versus uncertainty. That really, it's better to talk about uncertainties than risk first. I like that because we're uncertain that it is a risk, right, Dan?
Yeah. Hey, Jim, we got a good chat question here. Maybe let me read this. Are there any brainstorming methods you prefer for uncovering risk? And so maybe I'll start with this, and feel free to jump on if you'd like, Jim. So in the software, we've got 3 buckets of types of risk. You know, those 3 buckets we looked at: market dynamics, internal capabilities, and customer outcomes. And we find that it's helpful to bucket those, but we don't feel like we need to go through those in rote order. So what I like to do is let anybody, just any risk at all, and then we'll decide together how to color that thing. We find that's helpful. Now, the other thing we've done in the software, and I've been agonizing over the best way of doing this, we also created over 40 typical assumptions. Because what we found is when it comes to market-facing innovation, there are often some fairly common assumptions. Things like industry regulations won't block us, the market's big enough, we can scale up. So we put those 40 in there, and I started off not wanting to use those and let people brainstorm in a freewheeling fashion first. And then after they did their brainstorming freewheeling, then I would say, let's look at the typical assumptions like a safety net to see if we missed anything. But I've since kind of changed my mind on that. I've now gone to the typical assumptions first. And the reason I do that is the process goes faster, but also we didn't have a time to talk to you about this. But it's very important in how you phrase these assumptions. In order for our project to succeed, it must be true that industry regulations won't block us. So by doing the typical assumptions, which are all framed correctly first, that tends to make the process, you're kind of training people how to do this the first time. And so that's kind of where I've settled. So we do the brainstorming within the Minesweeper software that Jim was showing you. And other than that, I like to follow the basic rules of brainstorming. Build off each other's ideas. There's no bad ideas, no judgment on these things. So the basic rules of brainstorming. So I don't know if that helps. Oh yeah, here we go. Comment. The 40 typical assumptions are great. I've seen a similar processor. Yes, FMEA. That cut. Oh, look at that. Good for you. Thank you. I appreciate that feedback. I was kind of stumbling around finding it on my own, and you've seen it go from to cutting it way down. I love that. And the questions are based on an examination of 3 years of field failures. Wow. We should have a call with Mark sometime and learn a little bit more. But that's fascinating that this getting the typical assumptions out there really cut that down, Mark. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. I just add a few words here. Dan, very complete answer on that. What I found is in order to loosen up the room, depending if you really assemble a cross-functional team, which is incredibly important to do in this type of activity, is the outside in, and that's kind of like a dump. Just get everything out in the open and allow people to. If there's a lot of anxiety, it really depends where you are in the project. If you're trying to recover the project after the wheels have come off, that tends to work. If you're at the very early stage of a project that hasn't even been initiated, then I think, having the guidelines, as Dan says, to get people to start talking and the assumptions work. I think but it's never too late to deRisk. That's what I would make sure, because when I did a large project, we had some very large projects and the wheels had come off, and then we used these type of techniques and we got it back on track, and we were able to come in on time and on budget. So it's never too late.
I was working with a very large company, a multi-billion-dollar company in the Middle East, and we were doing like 12 of their projects all at the same time, their largest projects. And one of them had been going on for 10 years. And we decided to, de-risk that one. And there were some really, in hindsight, fairly obvious things that the team had missed all those 10 years. And it wasn't until they got together and had a thoughtful process that they said, my goodness, we better check this stuff out. So I would agree with your assessment. I had another team. We did, and I'll stop with the stories here. We did several of their projects, and a week later they killed their project. And I said, congratulations, you killed your project. And they go, yeah, we're really happy. I said, you don't sound very happy. And they said, well, we are. But the problem is we had all the information a year ago. We could have killed this thing a year ago, and we wasted all this time since then. So never too late, but start as soon as you can.
So I noticed that Stefan has raised his hand, so I'll let you talk, Stefan. Go ahead and
unmute. Yeah, you can unmute yourself, Stefan.
You can unmute yourself now.
I think maybe you have to have to do.
I set it up so.
Okay.
Okay, Stefan. I think you can unmute yourself if you want to speak, or
go
ahead, Dan.
Yeah, I can't do it, but maybe
I unmuted him, but he hasn't unmuted himself. So
okay.
With let's go back to the chat then. Stefan, if you can unmute yourself, that would be great.
In the Zoom toolbar there, huh?
Yeah. Are there any other questions while we're waiting for that? Yeah, I just find that this approach of just getting everybody on the same page and documenting it in this fashion and then tracking it week after week is we don't want to spend time to do this because very often it's difficult to bring together a cross-functional team.
Yep.
And probably one of the most difficult things to do is just getting the time on the schedule to get everybody together. But once you get them together, they don't want to stop.
Yeah, the other thing, Jim, we've noticed, we used to do this face-to-face in person pre-pandemic, And what we've been doing lately is in about 3 2-hour Zoom sessions, you can get this all pretty well set up. So what we find is the first Zoom session, you just brainstorm, use the consumption chain, which helps you generate more things, get it all out there. Second Zoom session, everybody has done their individual ratings. Now we do the team ratings. Mm-hmm. Third session, we do the checkpoint plan. And then after that, it's just a matter of meeting every week or 2 weeks and updating the progress on the checkpoint plan, investigations.
Excellent. So we just have one last polling question for you. We'd love to hear now that you have a taste of this derisking tool of managing uncertainties, love to get your feedback on the ranking of areas that you would think would apply, where you could apply this type of technique in your company. New product introduction, which Dan has done quite a bit, cross-functional projects, IT projects, R&D, capital, consolidation, or something other. You could use it for any large-scale cross-functional project. If there's others, whoever wrote, if you did write in other, please do enter it in the chat. These are just some of the areas that we think that are most relevant.
And let us know if you got something interesting. The other one that has come up recently that we didn't think about in this time, Jim, was mergers and acquisitions.
Yeah, M&A.
M&A. Yeah. And so that would be, we think, another good application. This is very embryonic for Jim and I and the rest of our team. And so we're still in the learning phase. So if you got one, we've done a lot of new product introductions, but if you got something that's out there and you want to experiment with this, let us know. We can have a little fun together with this as we learn together.
Yeah, please do reach out to Dan or myself and certainly set up a call to get you set up. I think, Dan, do you want to just cover your offering briefly here, next minute or two?
Yeah. So we have public-facing workshops every 5-6 weeks. They're like a 3-hour thing where we go in a lot more detail. Let us know if you want to join that. And I think, Jim, I said anybody who wants to come to one of those, we'll give them a free guest pass. It's normally a couple $100, but you can come in free and sit through 3 hours of this and get a much better understanding. And then if you do have a real project, what we like to do is have a coach join you for your first real project. Everybody gets software, move through the whole thing. So we would actually help you with your first project. After that, software as a service, $30 a month for the software, and you can keep using it in your company however you want. So let us know if you want to dive a little deeper, and we'll work with you. And then, Jim, you've got a couple more sessions coming up that you and I will be doing more. Roll up our sleeves, actually get into the software, applying it, where we'll have people unmuting and helping us actually march through a project, right?
Right. Looking forward to that.
Yeah.
So everybody can get a good feel about the power of this tool. It's simple, but it's powerful. That's what's nice about it. Simple and powerful. That's easy to sell, right? Simple and powerful.
That's it.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for your participation. If you have any questions, again, feel free to follow up. Just as a closure of the webinar, we do appreciate your time. There will be some webinars coming up. As I mentioned before, there's a webinar next week on supply chain risk and resiliency, on action plans. We'll be having probably another new product introduction, speed and resiliency, fireside chat too. We're looking at artificial intelligence. We have a webinar coming up on video, insight video into safety. Safety is a high risk area for most companies. And how do you use video technology and AI and machine learning to support those types of endeavor while maintaining privacy, which is a big issue. So we have some options there that we'll share with in a couple of weeks. Then we'll get back to digital twins in July. And then we have, again, the series here for the Acme composites in mid-July and mid-September, maybe on consolidations or maybe M&A, who knows. And then we're going to try to take on ERPs in next month sometime. So again, thank you for joining us today. And these are our tenants of EIG, and these are our different partners. We have over 40 companies as part of EIG that can be at your disposal, the best of the best in their particular areas. And Dan, again, and I thank you. Dan, any closing comments?
No, thank you all for joining us, and let us know if you want to dive a little deeper in this, and let Jim know if you want a free pass to one of our workshops to spend 3 hours with us on this if you'd like.
Thanks so much.